Welcome to the Nebraska Hawk's Nest. These guys are brave. They're Hawkeyes, living in enemy territory. Listen, these guys are way past their prime, but they're still Hawkeyes. They're spreading the Hawkeye hype to all of Nebraska. The frost advisory is canceled. Corn huskers, more like corn suckers. Are you ready for this podcast? Let's go Hawks!
All right. Welcome back to the Nebraska Hawk's Nest. Give us a like and subscribe. Our number one goal in life is to be the number one podcast in all of Nebraska because it's a Hawkeye thing. Joining us today is Captain Clutch himself, ice water running through his veins, Rob Houghtlin. Sir, how you doing?
I'm good, guys. How you doing?
We are doing great. Pretty dang excited to have one of the most heralded kickers in Iowa football history. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on in your life right now, how family is doing, how work is, where you're living. Update Hawkeye Nation on where you're at right now.
Fair enough. Yeah. So been married for 33 years this past June. We recently moved down to Atlanta, Georgia in August of 19. I've got 3 girls, 2 are married. I've got 1 brand new baby granddaughter, Kennedy Lane Clemens. My youngest had a baby back in February, on the 20th of February. And we're loving life down here in Marietta, which is a suburb of Atlanta. We moved down here because our girls were down here and my wife's folks are over just north of Clemson, South Carolina, a couple hours away. So that's good. Work-wise, currently, I'm doing some individual consulting and some contracting. I've spent the last 30 years in the ad tech, MarTech world. Most recently, a year and a half ago, I left Velasas, which is a offer and promotion company. I was there for a little over 8 years, or just under 8 years, I should say. And just, helping companies out now. I've had some contract work over the last 18 months with 3 pretty significant companies and having fun doing it and enjoy being their boss.
I know I'm a little frustrated with you right now, Rob. And Jerry and I were talking about this. Like, you look younger than we do. You look like you could still go out there and play. Like, what in the hell are you doing?
I was just gonna say one of us is aged, and it's not Rob.
Not Rob.
It's obviously me. So I mean.
Jeez, I got lucky genes. My dad, he's since passed, but he always looked younger than he was. And I try to take care of myself, but the beard's getting a little more silvery, and I just keep the hair short so you don't see all the gray.
I'm not even 40 yet, and my beard's going gray. This is ridiculous.
Well, so if you notice, there's a reason Adam and I both wear hats on these interviews. So
gotcha. Okay. I'm not going to ask any more questions about that.
I have hair, Jerry. I don't know what you're referring to here, but I so far have hair. It's turning gray and white, but hey, that's okay. So, hey, whenever the interview's over, if you want to send us like a list of some, self-care products and things that we can use to kind of make ourselves age a little better, because right now the fountain of youth is a far reach from us.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, I'm old school with Old Spice, like deodorant, and
really.
And I don't look. I'm not one of those I'm going to go to the mall and go to Kiehl's and buy all that stuff. I'm just keep yourself clean, and I try to get a workout in it most days that time allows. So that's about it.
Just don't tell me you still use Brut cologne or like Dracar Noir or anything like that.
No. And I'm not an Axe guy either. I'm too old for Axe. So
okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we want to kind of circle back here. Anybody that's watched the Big Ten Network, you have an extremely intriguing story about your journey to the University of Iowa. Started out at Miami of Ohio, I believe, and ended up walking on at the University of Iowa. And I'm going to let you tell the story because I've heard you tell it. You tell it a hell of a lot better than we'd be able to. Tell us how you ended up becoming a Hawkeye.
Yeah, I mean, it was a circuitous route, roundabout. So I played with a couple of guys that were at Iowa, Tim Sennett and Mike Bolin. Mike Bolin was one of my best buddies out of high school, if not my best friend. And I went to Miami of Ohio. And look, I went to Miami of Ohio not during a good time. Tim Rose was the coach, and they did some stuff that wasn't great, and it just wasn't going to be a fit for me. I'll leave it at that. I'll take the high road. And so I ended up going to the Thanksgiving before January of '84. So Thanksgiving '83, right before that, went and visited with Mike Bolin and Tim Sennett and saw Iowa. Had never been there, and was like, wow, this is way more big time than Miami of Ohio ever was. So I ended up talking with my dad, said, hey, I want to transfer. Little did I know at the time, Iowa was like 1/3 the price of Miami of Ohio. I had no idea.
Really?
And he said, sure, go ahead, man. If you can get in and go, right? I was going to save him some dinero. So I got in and ended up at that point, I went and talked to Carl Jackson, who was the running back coach and one of the special team coaches, and said, hey, look, I'd like to come kick here. And they were like, we'll see. They had allowed walk-on. So at that point, you had guys like Tim Sennett, who was a walk-on. He was a fullback behind Fred Bush. You had Devon Mitchell was a walk-on as well. Hayden was going to look, if you're the best guy, I don't care I remember he used to say, I don't care what color you are or how many arms and legs that you have. If you're the best player, you're going to come here and I'm going to let you play. Which I think in today's day and age is, or even back then was I think groundbreaking. Anyhow, Carl Jackson said, sure, come on out. So I went through winter conditioning and did all the things you were supposed to do, went through spring ball, couldn't wear full uniforms because back then you couldn't transfer. Got a new rule these days right now. You can transfer one time free and clear. And they said, hey, look, come on back in the fall. You don't have to come to 2-a-days. Just come when you get back on campus. So I did. I lasted like 6 or 7 days, and I got cut. And I get it, right? It's a numbers game. But I felt like I could kick at the University of Iowa. And so I kept practicing. And what I would do, guys, literally, is I would get out of class because I had set up my class schedule so that I could make practice, right? So I was done with class at like 12:30, 1 o'clock. So I'd go out to Kinnick Stadium and I'd kick balls inside of Kinnick Stadium because I could get in there. I couldn't get in the facility. And I'd do my kicking there, knowing full well when I was done with my kicking that coaches and players would be coming down, right? Even though I got cut. And so I did that for about 10 or 12 days. And then lo and behold, back in the day, they had the IM field goal kicking. I think they called it the George Blanda kicking contest. And I mean, guys, it wasn't super hard, right? You could use a kickoff tee, and then you kick from the 20, the 30, and the 40. And then you had 3 kicks that you could choose anywhere for the most points. So I went to the 40, 50-yarders, but literally it's a kickoff tee, right? And you ask anybody that's ever kicked in college at any level, that's a pretty easy kick to hit right down the uprights. I mean, it really was. I didn't miss any. So I ended up winning it, and the Daily Iowan, thank you, Daily Iowan, printed an article on a Tuesday. And I remember after practice, I was in Slater dorm, and Tim Sennett came by and he said, hey, I think Coach Jackson is going to be calling you after dinner tonight, so you might want to be in your room. Because this is pre-cell phone, right? There's no such thing as cell phones. I communicate all. I mean, we used carrier pigeon back then. So I get a call from Carl Jackson. And he says, yeah, I think maybe we got to see if there's a way that you can come back out. Maybe we might have not given you as good of a look as we should have given you. Why don't you come by the office tomorrow and we'll see if this thing will work out. So long story short, I go back in. They're like, okay, here's the gear. You can practice this fall. And I wasn't eligible to go on a bowl trip or anything. That was the Freedom Bowl year where Chuck had just a lights out game against Texas and all that. Didn't get to do any of that, which, okay, fair enough. And then that next spring, it was a wide open contest. And so at that point, a lot of things fell into place, and that's how I got there.
Yeah. So, Rob, what was your first impression when you met Coach Frye? I mean, you've never met him before. You walk in the office or wherever you met him, but for the first time, what was your first impression?
Well, I got to tell you, I was coached in high school by a guy by the name of Eugene Chikowski, who actually played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And his nickname was Chikowski.
Mm-hmm.
And he was old school. And I mean, guys, when I mean old school, it was my way or the highway. You didn't say anything. You just did what you were told. And so what that created for me was sort of a reverence for authority, right? Especially on a football field. And when I first met Coach Frye, he came out and he had the black hat on with like the wings on the bill, some of those hats you might
like
see.
this.
There you go. How about it? Like almost that hat exactly, except it said Iowa football. And he had these like dark rose sunglasses. And I remember Tommy Nickel was the kicker that fall. And he said, you ought to go introduce yourself to Coach Frye. Have you met him? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, go talk to him. And I'm like, oh gosh. I mean, and you never did this when I was in high school. You didn't do it. So I walked up and I introduced myself and he's like, so you're walking on here. And I said, yeah. He said, well, good luck. And that was about it. Well, and you guys might've heard this story. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 days later, I was kicking warm-up punts at the time. And I punted a ball that hit Coach Frye on the head. He was walking towards the goalpost, and it knocked his hat clean off and his sunglasses off. Okay. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm done. I'm gonna walk on. I don't even have all the gear, yada, yada, yada. And it was really interesting. Tommy Nichols said, well, you better go down and apologize. Right. And so I walked down there and more like sort of ran down there and said, Coach Frye, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And he looked and he said, did you kick that ball? I said, yeah. He goes, well, you are pretty accurate. and so it's to me, and you hear all these stories about Hayden. I'd say most of them are true. Some of them are real true. And then there's a little bit of embellishment. I just thought he was a wonderful, wonderful guy. And I mean, look, he gave me a shot as a walk-on. I ended up earning a ride that he gave me. And he gave me a shot at Iowa that he and Carl Jackson both, I'll be forever indebted to those two gentlemen.
All right, Rob, been doing a little thinking here, and you thought about this for quite a while. Why aren't we turning this into a movie script? Because this really feels like the Rudy version of a kicker, really overcoming adversity, never giving up against all odds, and then coming in and having such an impact on a program. Why are we not making this into a Hollywood script?
Yeah, because look, Rudy's one of my favorite movies because there's a simpatico feeling I have for what he did and believing that he actually could do it. I would like to say my dream was a little bigger. I didn't want to just be on a football team. I wanted to make an impact, and I felt like I had the ability. And I give people like Tim Sennett and Mike Bolin and Scotty Helverson and guys like Bill Happel. And a Tommy Nickel. I mean, I could go down the line. Just constantly, guys really seeing practice, and they'd be like, "Dude, don't quit. You can play at this level." Hey, it's maybe not a bad idea. I got some extra time on my hands. I might have to start writing a screenplay.
I'm not kidding. It sounds kind of like I was joking around, but that's a movie I would go see. And I don't know about you, Jerry, but what are your thoughts on that, Jerry?
Oh, I think it'd be fantastic, because who doesn't really love the story of the walk-on that ends up, getting the stage and, coming through in the clutch. So I'd be totally on board with it. I don't know who'd play Adam when they recreate this interview, but we
got to do this. Like, how did the whole thing get started? Right. And then spinning it, and all of a sudden, boom, it's 1984. Oh. I'm in gray sweatpants and winter conditioning. I love it. I think we can do it.
We can be the preamble, as far as the flashback goes. But
are you guys writers?
I can't
Not yet. Hey, not yet. If the money's right, we'll take it on.
When it comes to this story, there'll be smoke on the paper. I'll be writing away.
Hey, Rob, you've mentioned Tom Nickel a couple of times. You guys still keep in touch? We've tried to reach out to him, and he's not maybe the most prominent guy on social media, but I always kind of look at him as the original modern day Iowa field goal kicker. Do you still keep in touch at all, or?
You know what? I haven't seen Tommy in probably and I'm probably being generous, probably 10 years. Haven't talked to him. I'm not a huge social media guy. I follow it. I'm on it. I mean, that's how you and we got connected. The three of us here, Jerry, Nando, and Rob here, got connected vis-a-vis Instagram. But I haven't connected with him, and it's probably my fault more than his fault, because he was the guy early on, guys. I got to give a lot of credit to, who said, "Look, you can kick at this university." And look, the advantage I had back in the 80s, and Tommy did too, is we were kicking off tees. Okay. So that made it a little bit easier. But, I'm always a big believer that you're as successful as the people that believe in you. And Tommy was one of those guys. It was pretty cool. And you know what? If he hears this, I'd say, hey, Tommy, thank you. Right. And hopefully we'll hear it. If you guys are going to be the biggest podcast in Nebraska, why not be the biggest podcast in Iowa?
Well, we'd love to reach out. Anybody out there that has contact with him, we'd love to have him on and interview him. So we'll put the shout out there right now. So,
amen.
Rob, what are your thoughts on the current landscape of college football? Because you had to overcome a lot of adversity during your career. I find it hard to think of many players that would face the rejection that you had to go through and continually to keep chipping away and driving and staying focused on your dream. What are your thoughts with the, current landscape of, the one transfer rule that you can go transfer once anytime? And do you feel like we're done kind of seeing players be able to handle adversity like that?
Yeah. It's funny. I coached high school football when my girls were in high school at the local high school we were at, Adams High School in Rochester Hills, Michigan. And it's a fairly affluent suburb, et cetera, et cetera. And I bring that up to say what I've noticed and recognized over the last probably 10 or 15 years is that, hey, I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstraps and I'm going to fight through adversity. I feel like when adversity comes, that a lot of athletes, not just football players, but a lot of athletes are like, hey, that's not fair. I just wasn't raised that way. And I think that's probably why I was a fit at Iowa, because I don't think, for the most part, Iowans and Iowa fans are like that. I think, we expect that every time we hit the field, regardless of sport, that we're going to be in a fist fight, right? And we're going to bring our best game and we're going to fight through it. And my general sense is, I think that people that are currently playing the game at the collegiate level, when times do get tough, they look to move on rather than to fight through. There's a saying that I remember my dad used to say this all the time. There's no way out. There's only a way through. So don't look for a way out. Look for a way through, right? And it's just, here I am, 56 years old. I still think that way. If life gets tough, all right, well, you got to figure out how to get through it, period.
You're 56 years old. That just made me feel worse, man. And we're talking about that aging thing. So I
did play back in the 80s, guys. Just do the math.
I know, but 1985 seems like yesterday. It's hard to believe. So
yes.
That's a great quote too. I think that's something that needs to be repeated and said to, even like, guys our age professionally, and, guys coming up through college and through school and through high school, that, it's just things don't go your way and you think you're getting poor treatment. Guys quit, they transfer, they leave, don't find a way. What did you say? Find a way around, find a way through. Was that?
You can find a way through. There's no way out. There's a way through.
Yeah.
Figure it out. I was watching a movie the other night, and it's an old movie, Saving Private Ryan, right? When the guys got to Omaha Beach, they didn't say, I'm getting back on the boat. They figured out how to conquer that ridge line there at Omaha Beach in Norman. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't get it. I was a walk-on. Figure out how to earn a ride and be successful. And if you don't cry about it. Learn from your experience.
Oh, I'm getting fired up right now.
So, Rob, tell us, coming up through the ranks when you did, high school, college, what made a kicker back then? What, because right now, Keith Duncan just started his kicking school, and we're getting all these specialized training and all this difference. How did Rob Houghtlin go about becoming a kicker? How did you come into that role?
Yeah, that's, great question, Jerry. I think that for me, believe it or not, you guys might remember this name, Jan Stenerud.
Yep.
Who's like, he's if you think I'm old, he's 100. But he was real good. But he developed the first soccer style kickoff tee, because they used to be these old, huge, big post orange tees that if you were a soccer style guy, you had to sort of set it up cockeyed so you didn't break a toe kicking through it. I literally picked one up at Wilson Sports Shop in Winnetka, Illinois, when I was in I believe it was summer between my 7th and 8th grade year, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a pure lark. I'm like, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna try it out. And it had how to kick a football booklet in it. And I literally followed the booklet. And what I found out pretty quick, because I didn't play soccer at all. I played hockey, I played baseball, I messed around playing basketball in everybody's driveway, all that stuff. But it was back then, it was, whatever game was going on. If it was street baseball, if it was playing street hockey or ice hockey, whatever it was. But I ended up being pretty good at kicking on the Janssen kicking team. So my first year playing football was 8th grade for me. I hadn't played football prior to that because I was playing hockey. My dream was to be on Miracle on Ice. I mean, you guys know that movie, right? I wanted to be a hockey player, et cetera, et cetera. Problem is as the game got faster, I didn't get much faster. So probably athletically wasn't the great thing. But boom, I fell into football. I loved it. Started kicking. Was pretty good at it, and then started working at it. Again, I go back to influences in my life, either my father or uncles or coaches that basically said, look, if you want to get good at something, you got to work at it. And so I started working at it and had a knack for it. My father was a golfer. And so a lot of what happens in soccer style kicking, the way you move hips, you rotate, the weight shift, power generation, follow through, hip alignment, where your head knee, all of that stuff is very, very, very similar. So for me, that's where I learned it and then just kept honing my craft. And I remember my father saying to me, again, every summer, if you don't work at this thing, you're not going to get any better, right? There's that line from The Natural. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie, but
oh yeah,
early in that movie, the father says to the son, you've got a gift, but it's not enough. If you don't work at your gift, you're going to fail. And I didn't see that movie till I was done and all that. But I in essence got that type of coaching from family and coaches when I was growing up. And to me, it was flat out old fashioned hard work.
I find that really interesting that you had a booklet. You found a booklet on how to kick. Jerry and I found a pamphlet on how to start a podcast, and it's garbage. And say, here we are.
Look at you now. You guys are pro.
My favorite part of that whole analogy was when he mentioned Jan Stenerud and Adam's face just went blank because that was way before his time. So I
had no clue. All right.
Glazed over eyes.
Okay, I want you two to buckle in and put your seatbelts on real quick and hold on to your armchairs. Okay, it's 1985. We have the #1 Iowa Hawkeyes. We have the Michigan Wolverines rolling into town. We're going to do a little replay of a clip here, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. So you guys listening on the podcast, close your eyes, not if you're driving, and use your imagination. Otherwise, hop on the YouTube channel and check this out.
All right, and now we're just about ready for football history one way or the other. Just about ready for the play. The Sennett ball is snapped. The kick is up, and it's long enough. And it's good!
Freaking beautiful. Love it. Every single time I see it, I want to punch the wall. I get so fired up and excited. So we got a million questions, a lot of things about that moment. Going up and the process of the kick, going up to it, everything involved in that moment, Rob. Walk us through that. What was going on in your mind? What was the atmosphere? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, well, so you got to remember the kick before that I missed. I was short right on. And I think part of that because I had played that game, and the game before that had pulled my quad and had some issues, and I can say that was the reason why, but I missed it, right? And so I was thinking a little bit about that, like, okay, you got to hit this thing solid. I knew I didn't need to crush it, right? Because we were getting close. And really in that drive, guys, I thought I was going to be kicking an extra point. I really did. And then all of a sudden, with like a minute 21 left, I realized like, Hayden's playing the long game here. He's going to make sure that Harbaugh and his crew aren't going to get any time to do anything, and he believes in you. And at that point in time, Mike Bullen and Tim Sennett grabbed me, and they say, hey, look, we want to make sure you're focused on this. Because I think they knew more than I knew what a big deal this was going to be, right? That like there's a lot of people watching. Iowa's #1. Probably the one thing that I was able to do was focus pretty well. So I wasn't thinking about that, and they were. And so I think they were trying to sort of zero me in. But I remember the timeout getting called, and I remember it feeling like it was forever to get going, right? And mind you, this is the seventh game of the season, I believe, or sixth game of the season. And we had played some tough games, and we had a nail biter a couple weeks before with Michigan State, where Chuck had the naked boot, and he's throwing the ball up in the air, but besides that, I mean, think about this, guys. We were killing people, right? I mean, we were at Iowa State, like, I don't know, was it like 65-7 or something crazy? I mean, it was crazy, right? I mean, we had an offense with guys like Quinn Early and Robert Smith and Ronnie Harmon. I mean, it wasn't hard scoring points, but this was a tight one. So I remember going out there thinking this is taking forever, and then Bo calls a timeout. And before every kick, I had a routine that I went through, and part of it was routine, and part of it was to settle myself down mentally, and that was to really bend over my tee. I said a prayer. I really offered up that time because I'm a man of faith, and just said, "Hey, God, just use this how you want to use this," right? And people are probably thinking, "You had to say, please let me make it." Yeah, I did. Okay, I definitely said that because I didn't think about this. I mean, I'm 20 years old, for crying out loud.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go, right? And you guys probably figured this out with the time that we've been on this podcast. I'm wound tighter than most, energy wise, so I'd rather get going than wait. So then there's the timeout called, and then I'm like, okay. So I walk over, and Hayden doesn't want to say a whole lot to me. He's like, you've done this 100 times before. We don't have to worry about this. It's just like practice. Go out and make it. Words to that effect. Go back out, and he calls another timeout. That's 2 in a row. So, and I'm a pretty cocky kid at that point. So you guys might have seen on the film, there's actually a spot where I turned around there and looked at Bo Schemmerich, and I'm like, it's not going to mean a thing, because I was full of, as they would say, piss and vinegar. Yeah. And I ended up going back, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be fine. That's when Mark Sindlinger said to me, you might want to check how far back your tee is. I don't think it's back far enough. And he was dead right. It was like a little over 6 yards, which is like insta block. Okay. So I backed it up 1.5 yards, went over it, and I got back into the routine. And that's where really it becomes, look, you got to spend your time preparing and getting ready. And I really don't remember a whole lot of like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make this. I just remember hit it solid and follow through. That's all I thought about. And you know what? Perfect snap, perfect hold, great blocking. Even though you look at Brad Cochran from Michigan, looks like he's close to it. He wasn't close to it. I mean, everybody did what they were supposed to do. So all 11 guys executed, and we ended up winning the game.
So when you go back to that moment, Rob, and I mean, we all see the celebration. So much of that moment has been captured. Can you give us a little behind the scenes, like what happened after the game? I mean, the celebration environment, were there any great stories behind the scenes, afterward, the celebration, or did you just go home and start studying again and no big deal?
Come on, guys, you know better than that, right?
Downtown Iowa City, Rob. What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, downtown Iowa City was rocking. I remember right after the kick, there's a big pile up. You guys have probably heard the stories. Mark Vlasic blows his knee out in the pile up. And that was a pretty freaky thing because there were so many people, not just our team, but people that went on the field. You were kind of like, oh my goodness. Then all of a sudden bodies are getting pulled off and flying out and all that. I remember the locker room, which was, I mean, by the way, the old locker room at Kinnick Stadium was not like what the guys have now, which is like top notch, right? There aren't many better in the country. Pretty small. We sang and hooted and hollered, as Hayden would say, louder than I think I can ever remember. And it wasn't about like, hey, Rob made the kick, or Chuck had a great throw, or Mike Flagg had a great gain, or Scott Halverson had a great catch, or Ronnie Harmon had a great run, or Larry Station had a great tackle, or Jay Norvell, all that stuff. We were ranked number 1. We beat the number 2 team in the country. We're on CBS. I mean, it was a blast. And I think it was like fast, because I remember getting showered, dressed. It was later, and I remember everybody saying, hey, everybody's headed downtown. And I think it's funny, my parents had driven in from Chicago to watch the game, And normally I would get dinner with the game after the game with him and all that kind of. My dad's like, no, you need to go celebrate with the team. And it was a pretty late night on Saturday night. But you got to remember one thing. It wasn't that late because Hayden had a rule. You had to be at the Sunday morning shakeout run, which was, if I remember correctly, it was either 7 or 8 o'clock. Either way, it's an early hour for a college kid. You had to be at the shakeout run over at the facility at 8 o'clock. And he did that to make sure the guy stayed out of trouble. I mean, think about this. So it was a pretty wild night. And I remember after the shakeout run on Sunday morning, going out to breakfast with my folks and Mike Bolin, who was my roommate at the time in Cider Hall. And the town was still buzzing then, because I think it was one of those times where economically it was so tough in Iowa. Farms were challenged, crops were challenged, and it was for all of us an opportunity to escape into a victory that I think not only the team, the school, but the state could enjoy. Especially over, Darth Vader, who was Bo Schembechler at Michigan.
Well, I want to reference back to that Darth Vader comment there. It's been noted the arrogance of Michigan during that time period. Can you elaborate a little bit on the Michigan program, coaching staff, and players, and the overall arrogance going into that game? Because you never would have thought they were number 2 by the way they were handling them, carrying themselves.
Oh, you would have thought they were 1 and we were 2, right? Mm-hmm. We were the little brother, as they would say to the Michigan State fans. For me, it goes back personally a little bit longer, because I got recruited for a hot second by Michigan when I was at New Trier High School in Winnetka. And I had a conversation with Bo Schembechler actually on the phone, and he said, if we were to bring you into the University of Michigan, would you kick or punt? And I said, both. And he goes, well, you can only do one. And I said, well, why couldn't I do both if I'm the best at both? I mean, it's not that hard. It's not like I'm playing linebacker and saying I also want to play running back. And, I'm going to be in 100 plays. And he said, no. And then they stopped recruiting me. But the lead up was, look, and I think it still permeates Michigan right now. I think it's actually what's holding Michigan back today. And this might get picked up somewhere, but I don't care. I don't live in Michigan anymore. I think the way they act, they still think they're the Michigan of the 80s today. Uh-huh. And in the 80s, they still thought that they were the big bad mambo jambas from the late 70s. And they were good, don't get me wrong, but they just walked with a swagger and this expectation that they were going to beat whoever they played. And I think to a certain extent, while I respect that, I didn't ever see in the 3 years we played against Michigan, I never saw them acknowledge the excellence that is Iowa. Hmm. And that to me is a chip on my shoulder I've had ever since. Now, I've since sent a kid to Michigan. My middle daughter went to Michigan, and but there was an arrogance there that you just sort of you could feel, you could almost taste it, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a sweetness when you beat them, and I think Hayden probably stoked that in all of us. Like, they don't respect us, they don't think that we can win this game. There was that whole lead up, and every year that I was at Iowa and played, there was always that feeling. And I think it's a cultural issue that they're having an issue with even today in 2021. I mean, they still think they're as good as Ohio State.
Well, I think there's parallels there big time with the University of Nebraska. And I think that's why, when we started playing them and we weren't good enough to be their rival, and they were unwilling to acknowledge us and give us any credit for being a quality program, that that's why we're smacking it to you right now. It's very similar, I feel like, a modern-day version. And tell me what your thoughts are, Rob.
Nebraska's got to wake up and realize it's not 1974.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Your big rival, Oklahoma, they can't even take the field with them. Remember back in the day when it was Oklahoma and Nebraska. Those days are long gone. And the fact that Iowa was teed off on Nebraska for how many years now?
6.
Like literally teed off, like who's your daddy teed off on you, okay? And then the expectation last year, they're going to be good. And then all of a sudden now everything I'm reading and I'm listening is they think they're going to be good this year.
Every year.
I mean, what's different?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, isn't it the definition of insanity, guys?
You would think, and that's why they're like, all Iowa cares about is beating Nebraska. Like that's sad existence. No, that's not all we care about. We just really enjoy it because of the years of arrogance and dismissing us, like you guys did. That we're not good enough to be your rival. Yeah, you're right, because you got to beat us more than once every 10 years to call it a rivalry.
Yeah, I can't even remember the last time Nebraska beat Iowa.
2014. 2014, Rob.
What was the score?
27-24 overtime. We had a 24-7 lead. Not that we were paying attention here, but
oh boy.
That was the day, Jerry.
So it's like, okay. So they, that's like stealing a candy bar from the 7-Eleven if it's a Nebraska win, for crying out loud. Or actually more like, the QT or the come and go. Come on.
The reason I remember so well is I was in Des Moines that day and driving home, and I thought if Iowa loses this, I got to turn back around. And I basically was like, maybe I just turn back around now and not go back for another week or so. So, but, Rob, one thing I've always wanted to know with that Michigan game too is, do you send Scott Helverson a Christmas card every year telling him thank you for just being a little too fast that the officials didn't realize he was in bounds on that touchdown catch, or else you maybe never get that opportunity for that field goal?
Yeah, Scott, well, couple of things. If it were played today, that would have been a touchdown because he would have gone to replay and all that kind of stuff. I do. But it's interesting you say that, because it gets back to sort of some of the questions and stuff that you guys have asked me, we've talked about. Back then, I guess I give credit to Scotty for being more of a gentleman than maybe some players would be today, because I think they really complain now. I mean, Scotty was like, come on, I was in. He knew he was in. I owe him more than a Christmas card. Because, there was opportunity. But there was so much stuff in that game, guys, that ended up sort of, I mean, if it's guys dropping interceptions, if it's touchdowns that really shouldn't have been, if it's, almost having Jim Harbaugh tackled and he does the shovel pass, happy birthday to Jamie Morris, touchdown, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But, that was the nature of it. I mean, that was really an old-fashioned who's got the stronger arm in an arm wrestling match. And Iowa came through in that deal. And, look, I was lucky enough to kick the kick, but I think so much of that was so much more of the overall toughness. And I would also say this, the genius of Bill Schneider and Hayden calling the game the way they called that game. Because, I mean, you guys have probably read stuff. I mean, we ran when we should have passed. We passed when we should have ran. And I think they kept Michigan on their toes. And to me, that was the beauty of that win more than anything else.
Yeah. And give the defense credit too. Larry Station blocking the middle on that play to get the ball back. I mean, it's, it was a total team effort. And I mean, it totally epitomized being a game of inches in that game. But I kind of, like I said, though, I didn't know Rob Houghtlin maybe owes a little bit of thanks there, at least to.
For sure.
All right, we're going to shift down the line a little bit to 1986. Captain Clutch comes through one more time, yet again. Let's take a look at this amazing play. This is something that I got a lot of questions about once we see this.
With 4 seconds left. And here we are, high pass. The kick is away, and it is good. Oh, what a job Hartley did getting the ball down for Houghton.
All right there. So not the best sound quality, but that's okay. I really want to know what happened with that play. And we're talking about, for the guys everyone that's listening on podcasts, the 1986 Holiday Bowl, a really good San Diego State team. I got to be honest with you. I rewatch that game all the time, and it's like I get pulled back into it. And it's like you feel like there for a while we're not going to win that game. They really pulled ahead of us for a while. And when that ball was snapped, it looked like you kind of slipped when you kicked the ball, and man, you drilled it though. Walk us through that play in another game-winning kick.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I felt like for some reason it was one of those nights and games where it just didn't click.
Yeah.
And we just talked about the Michigan sort of arrogance. I think we may have had a little of that Big Ten. Hey, we're Big Ten. You guys are, what was it? The WAC. And maybe there was some of that. But anyhow, so let's get to the play. Guys, I got to tell you, honestly, when it happened, I had no idea the snap was high. I had no idea. Didn't look, didn't see, because I always trained on. You see out of my left eye as I'm looking down at the tee, you see the ball coming. As soon as I see the ball, I go. Okay, because that was from a timing standpoint, you got to get it off in like 1.1 to 1.3 seconds. Otherwise, no matter who you're playing against, someone can get back there, right? Even if they do or they don't. So had no idea. Next thing I know, ball's down. But I realized I'm getting ready to go down. So I slipped and I get roughed, by the way. No call, doesn't matter, because again, I get back to the same thing. It was hit it solid, hit it smooth, keep your head down, follow through. That's what I said. And so I got a good knock on the lower third of the ball, and at that point, it was good. It wasn't until I looked at the film, and I was like, oh my goodness, number one, snap was high. It wasn't crazy high, but it was high.
Yeah.
Chuck makes a phenomenal catch and hold. Like I have no idea that it's high, and he gets it down exactly where it's supposed to be. Everybody blocks. It was one of those. I mean, I remember doing a hokey pokey and Frye because he knew the snap was high, but I was the only guy on the whole team besides the guy that we're blocking that knew it was high. Because I remember my dad saying to me after the game, "Boy, that was a high snap. Chuck did a great job." I'm like, and it's not like you could like instantly go to ESPN to see the highlight back in those days.
Yeah.
So it was a great job, and that field though, Jack Murphy Stadium was notorious for having crappy turf at the time.
Oh, okay.
And that was one of the reasons the slippage. I know I missed a long one in that game. And when we played the next year, I had my final game in Iowa was awful. I think I missed an extra point and was short chippy. But big piece of that was you never felt like you got good footing. I mean, ask Nate Kading. He played a whole lot of professional football games in that stadium for a while. And I think he said the same thing. The turf is just crappy.
Yeah. Rob, when we were looking up these highlights earlier, and I'm not bringing this up to bring back a bad memory, but I think it's a great life experience. So because when we're looking up these highlights, I came across a Minnesota game where the ball went wide at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. And I'm not bringing that up, but I mean, the fact of the matter is now you're remembered now for the successes more so than the failures, but you did have those setbacks as well. And I mean, but yet you still push through, just like you said, growing up. And I mean, I just was like, wow, I had totally forgot about that, and
well, it's really funny to think about this. Every game-winning kick that I had at Iowa, every single one that I had at Iowa, the kick before that was a miss.
Really?
Every single one. So you think Michigan, think Purdue, think Minnesota, and San Diego State. All the kicks before that were misses. Now, I would argue with you, if you look at the film in the Minnesota game, the 50-yarder, I think it was good because it went over the left upright. I think it was just in time, but it didn't go good. So, but again, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of you can't control the past, only the present and the future, right? So, got to figure out. It's a little bit like Garza shooting free throws. I think I heard some quote. He's like, I don't think about the ones that I missed. I think about the one I have to make right now. And so that's sort of the mentality that, and again, I credit the coaching staff for helping me with that big time, because I think that was one of the things that we constantly were drilled into you is when you get a chance to make a play, go make the play. And don't think about the play you didn't make. Think about the play you can go make.
So before we got on air here, we had a little bit of talk about the name, image, and likeness rules that are coming in. And, we know you got some opinions on that. You had some pretty cool ideas and some pretty innovative thoughts on the name, image, likeness. How do you feel that's going to change the game of college football? And what type of things do you see ahead of on the landscape of college football?
Yeah, I've been in the ad tech, martech space for quite some time. And I think, today is we're in the middle of July, and we're 2 weeks into, right? Today's July 13th or 12th. I don't know. It's
13th.
13th, right? So we're 13 days into NIL. and you've already got people saying that it's going to be $1 billion industry within the next 18 months, right? That's huge. I think what it's going to do is it's going to change the landscape and open things up. I think this is going to be like the great land grab of the early 1800s going out west. I really do, because I think the NCAA isn't controlling it. It's up to the institutions. Conferences aren't going to be able to control it. Big sports entities, so think ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC, etc., aren't going to be able to control content. What we're doing right now on a podcast, you can do on a phone from a video standpoint. So I think those folks that are curating and delivering content to people don't have to be huge names. And I also think the people that are actually distributing it and then ultimately consuming it are going to consume it in ways that we may not have seen before, right? If it's your mobile phone, if it's some other device, or in some other way, if it's vis-a-vis when I'm getting ready to go make a bet, who knows what it is, right? But I think it opens up for people that are developing the content, curating the content, distributing the content. And I think consumers now are looking at it in a much different way. Back when I was playing, it was literally a TV. That's where you watched everything. So think about all the stuff that you can see now. And as a player, regardless of sport, you now have access to the monetization of that content, which they never had access to before. And so I'm not sure how it's going to win, but I do know that there are some people that are, I do know this. I don't think ESPN, I don't think Fox, I don't think CBS, I don't think NBC. I'm missing any other FSN, all the biggies, right? None of them are going to be able to act quickly enough to figure out how to leverage the monetization of this. And I think it's going to go to guys like you two and others that are going to say, hey, there's an opportunity here for me to get access to content of sports that were behind, programs that were behind, et cetera, that you never had before. And nobody's going to stop you. NCAA's not coming in, are they? No. And I don't know if you saw what University of Iowa, they've hired this company, and I think they've been with them for a couple of years, Influencer. And they're enabling the players to package themselves to leverage name, image, likeness. Okay. And so if I'm a recruit, hey, I can go to a school that's actually going to help me do this. But here's my question. Who's really got the skin in the game? Is it the university? Is it the company that's helping? Is it the player? Is it whoever's delivering the content or curating the content? Is it who's consuming the content? Is it a third-party company that wants to leverage name, image, likeness for said athlete, for said sport? Who knows? And I think it's a great opportunity. I also think that there could be some really weird stuff that go on out of this. I think it'll reshape sort of our perspective on college athletics. But anybody that's been operating in the 20th and 21st century has realized college athletics is big, big business. Yeah. And it's about time that people figure it out. My only caveat, and I've talked a lot about this, if players think they're going to get rich off of name, image, likeness, I think they're going to be sorely disappointed. I think they'll make some money off of it, and that's a good thing. But I don't see, for example, a player at the University of Iowa. Let's take Garza, for example. Would he have made $1 million last year playing basketball, leveraging name, image, likeness? I just don't see that kind of money there yet. But someone's going to come along and figure out how to make money off this, guys, in my opinion. I don't know.
Well, is there any corner of Rob Houghtlin's mind that looks back and says, wow, if name, image, likeness had just existed in the mid 80s, how could my name have been monetized? I mean, seriously, you really, you had the following, you had the name. I mean, do you ever kind of wonder how that might have affected your experiences back in college? Or
yeah, well, it might have helped, like college funds for my girls. Yeah, I could have made some money, put some money away. No, I mean, back then, I definitely have thought about it. I actually thought about, is there something where you could leverage an NFT for the play, right? But again, CBS, the university, who owns the rights and all that to what that looks like. So I'm like, you know what? And to be honest with you guys, and I hope this doesn't come off as being more altruistic than I really want to be. The memory of it is enough for me. It really is. I mean, it was and I mean this wholeheartedly 100% till my dying day. It was an honor to play for the University of Iowa. It was an honor and a privilege.
Sure.
And so I balance that with this whole NIL thing and say, how much of this are you appreciating the honor and privilege to go do what you do? And how much are you saying, hey, show me the money? You're having a Jerry Maguire moment, right? I think there's going to be a balance there somewhere. But that's the Midwestern boy in me that says, you know what, be thankful for what you have, grateful for what you have, and be appreciative for it and try to pass it on to others.
All right, Rob, we need to step back from all this real quick and take a step into our Nebraska Hawks Nest time machine. We're going to go back into 1985. We're sitting in your car, okay? Pop open that tape deck. What cassette is going to come shooting out then? And then if we grab your phone right now and go to your last played song, what's that going to be today?
Wow. Okay, so 1985, what you would find is one of two things, either Jimmy Buffett,
okay,
or probably James Taylor, but more likely Journey.
Okay, all right, I like that.
Right?
All right.
Today, if you were to look at what I was listening to riding Peloton today, it was classic rock, and there was actually on the cool down ride, Jimmy Buffett, the last song that I listened to, and then because he's still singing, believe it or not, even though he's 70, 100 years old, and I'm still listening to classic rock. No, not so much James Taylor because it's not it. But I've got daughters, so it could be,
Music is so bad right now.
Well, here's the thing.
We're getting old.
Get off my lawn.
I am getting old. But I don't particularly love a lot of the new stuff. So I'm an old classic rock guy, probably more than anything. Yeah. I'd still listen to Journey, but I still think that sounds kind of cheesy 80s.
If you could see anybody in concert right now, just 2 tickets will magically appear. Who would it be?
Oh gosh. I think I would probably, if like one of two people right now, I'd go see Kenny Chesney.
Okay.
Or I would go see Luke Combs.
Okay.
Country probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I would probably, because it would be rocking and yeah. I've seen Buffett so many times in concert. I'd be like, you know what? He forgot the words.
Okay. Jerry, what about you, Jerry? What concert would you go to? I want to hear this.
What's that?
What concert would you go to right now, Jerry?
Boy, the pressure is on me right now. I was supposed to go down. They were going to have that reunion concert with Def Leppard and Joan Jett, and we were supposed to go to Kansas City last year for COVID for that, and Poison, and I'm trying to remember who the fourth one was. But anyway, something like that. I'm a throwback guy. The old concerts would be fun. It's just fun to go back and kind of revisit your childhood. So, but how about you, Adam? You're the only one left out here.
The not so new Kids on the Block, I'd have to say. No, I'm totally kidding. I don't know.
You are not. We know that was true.
That'd be a tough one. That is a tough one. If I could see anybody live, regardless of live or dead, I'd say Led Zeppelin would be my number one. If I could see absolutely anybody, that would be my number one. But you can't get that whole band back together anymore. So that's a pretty difficult one. But Led Zeppelin would always be my number one choice. So go ahead, Jerry.
Well, no, Rob, I guess go back to 85. If you're listening to this music, who are you hanging out with on the team? I mean, who were the guys that you palled around with, hung out, went downtown, Ped Mall? And,
I would say, obviously my roommate, Mike Bolin, Scott Helverson and Tim Sennett were roommates, hung out with Jay Norvell, some with Bill Happel. I'm trying to think. I'm thinking in Slater Hall. I lived right across from Nate Creer and Devon Mitchell. Robert Smith was on our hallway. You hung out with the guys, and that was the beautiful thing I think about that team is there was an ease with hanging out. I remember one time I had to go somewhere, and I had a car, but someone had borrowed my car, and it was a beater. Right? It was such a beater that the driver door didn't work. I had to crawl in through the passenger door.
I had one of those.
Yeah. And nowadays, kids wouldn't even think about driving that car.
Yeah.
But I remember I needed to get somewhere like downtown near the old Capitol. And I remember Devon Mitchell said, hey, you can borrow my scooter. And it was one of those things like he didn't even think twice about it. Threw me the keys like it was nothing. And there was a whole lot of that sort of, I think there was a special chemistry to that team. And a lot of the teams, that I was there. But those would be the guys that I hung out with a bunch. And we would just, that was dorm living, right? Because back then, Hayden said, I wasn't able to live outside of the dorm until I was a fifth-year senior.
Really?
He made you live on campus. It was a tight shit, man.
No.
But we hung out together.
Rob, we want to end with one thing we like to ask all of Hawkeye legends, that if you got one story from maybe the practice field or the weight room or conditioning that you look back on now as an adult, as a grandfather now, with that ageless face of yours that pisses us off, what is a really good memory that you have?
I don't know if you caught that. We got to start riding a Peloton now too. So it's skincare and Peloton bikes, because I heard that one dropped earlier. So.
I'm a little bit of a Peloton freak. I will say that. I'm not like doing the PRs all the time, but it's just an easy thing. It's in a house, and regardless of where you are, it's easy.
Well, this is starting to sound overwhelming to me. So Adam, go ahead and go with your question. I don't want to hear about any more things that I've got to do here.
Jerry's already starting to sweat.
I'm sweating just thinking about it.
I respect that. I totally respect that.
He started sweating just saying Peloton. But going back to, during your playing days, whether it be practice, conditioning, the weight room, anything in the locker room, something that you kind of look back on that was a little bit of an odd, strange, funny moment that the average fan, obviously we weren't there. We didn't get to see it. We love to get, different stories from players of things that, the average fan didn't get to witness.
Yeah. I it's funny. I was just rolling through I got hundreds, right? But I'm thinking, how do I answer that question where somebody be like, I can't believe that happened. I remember in fall of '85, I was just throwing a football around and had a pretty decent arm, but not a great arm. And I remember for some reason, receivers came out early, kickers came out early, was throwing around, and someone said to me, do you think you could throw a fake? I'm like, sure, yeah, absolutely, I could throw a fake. I'm thinking, how can this be, right? You got, either you got a fullback coming out in the flat and it's almost like a little bubble screen, or you're running it out and all that kind of stuff. Well, so Hayden comes out and says, and I think it was Bill Schneider said, how they can throw the ball? I think we can run fake. And so he's like, all right, let's try it live. Well, I got to tell you, it was awful. Okay. So they snapped it to me. I tried to throw it out. And I got to tell you this right now, I couldn't have thrown it in the ocean and made it, for crying out loud. I hopped it in there, and he's like, hey, relax, try it again. And so I do it again, and this time it's a little bubble screen, and I throw it and to this point, I remember that we were on the Dwayne Banks practice field, which is the old baseball. I probably threw it. I don't even know who it was. They needed to be 25 feet tall. I threw it so high in the second one. And Frye turns and says, you probably need to just stick to kicking.
Oh, that's a great story.
That was that one. But the other one, that's a story about me. But the other one that I think is, to me, like, you wouldn't know. You probably hear stories about this, but I think about guys like Ed Crowley and John Streif and other trainers that were there, that were guys that were banged up. And I got to tell you guys, these guys show up at like dark 30 and they stay late, making sure guys can play. And I just remember, because I had a pulled quad, like, oh, geez, it's like having a hangnail, right? But there were guys that were really, really banged up, like they could barely walk. They had bad turf toe, and they were fashioning steel inserts to go in their shoes so that they could play, right? So their toes wouldn't bend. And I think my story there is, I remember those guys always being there in the facility. And I think that dedication, the average fan probably hears about, oh yeah, trainers take care of people. I mean, these folks, like, I mean, the commitment there is crazy. It really is. And I think that there are a lot of guys like and played in that game. I mean, I think Larry Station was hurt in that game. A bunch of guys everybody was hurt in that game probably, right?
Yeah.
And the reason they were able to play was because guys like Ed and John and others were there. Russ, who's I think he's still at the University of Iowa. Russ would show. I mean, I kid you not. If you said, "Hey, I got class until 9:00 tonight," and they'd be like, "All right, we'll see you at 9:15." Like, really? Like that to me is the commitment that I think is pretty special about Iowa. I'm sure it happens other places, but that would be the story that, to me, that I'd want people to know. Like, there are people that you never see, you don't know their names, that make it happen. And guys like us that played, and I was just a kicker, but guys that really needed to be right to play, linebacker, receiver, O-line, D-line, whatever it is. Guys like that made it happen.
Rob, I got to say, this has probably been our longest interview of all time because we were so excited to talk to you. No,
so I've actually got one last question, Rob. I'm being serious.
Jerry, you need to know we're running on about 3% battery right now.
This is a really quick yes or no one, but I mean, just honestly, it was such a big part of your life. Has there been a day in the last 35 years that you haven't thought about the kick at least once in the day?
Honest answer?
Yeah.
Probably not.
That's because I just had to ask. It came into my mind, but
I mean, I use it as a source of strength. Look, times are going to be hard. And what do you do to keep yourself motivated when times are hard? You think about things where you were successful. And it's one of the ways that I motivate myself. And look, I know it wasn't all me, but I was a part of it. So I can draw on that as strength to get through the next hard thing that's coming along in life.
Heck
well,
yeah.
I mean, we draw on the things that give us the most emotion, and I can't imagine what that emotion had to be like in that moment. So it was just something that popped in my mind. I appreciate you indulging me on that answer. So
absolutely,
Rob. Hey, thank you so much for taking time to come on with us and all the awesome memories you created for us Hawkeye fans, everything you did during your time there. And we just want to wish you and your family nothing but the best. And hopefully we can keep in touch and maybe do this again closer to football season.
Look, I would love nothing more than to sit down and talk for a couple more hours with you guys. I love your fandom and the fact that you're doing this in enemy territory. Give you credit. If I could give you a medal or a badge, I would. And if you guys you want to talk and you just want to shoot the crap and not be on a podcast, call me. Okay?
Oh, it'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Right. Thanks, Rob. Go Hawks.
All right. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.